I'm Eric Smith.
Yeah, Joshua Perryman.
All right, we're here to talk about badges and badge systems and red team. So, quick little intro. Obviously, we'll have an intro. We'll talk a little bit about what red team testing is, real quick, high level kind of things you guys already know, and then dive into exactly what we're here for, which is just RFID hacking. So, a little about the company that I work for and part owner of, Lars Consulting. Josh also works there. We specialize in a wide range of services, but also red team testing. That's one of our bread and butters. We've presented at lots of places. That's me. That's Josh.
Me.
And true story, we've been lucky enough to build a company and perform things that are more our hobby than anything. So we've been lucky enough to get paid to do what we like to do. A little background, red team testing has a pretty long definition you guys can read if you want to, but the analogy we typically use is the point of red team testing is to put somebody in a fight. If you guys are in a fight and you're actively fighting and defending and offense and defense, you'll get better over time. So the whole point of red team testing is actively engage someone in a fight, whether they're on the defense side or the offense side. Obviously, reasons to conduct it. The one thing we try and harp when we do red team testing is it immediately brings impact to a business. So whereas a bunch of other services might take some time to start trickling up and down the ladder so executives or technicians understand exactly what the risk is, red team testing brings that to the surface pretty quickly. Red team testing often is referred to as a blended threat type of attack, and where we focus on is a blend between all three of those components of social, electronic, and physical. And today we'll actually be talking about where physical and electronic blend. If any of you guys had a chance to take Chris Nickerson's red team talk or red team class with Ian, they focus on a lot more of those components, but today we're talking strictly between physical and electronic. So a little background. You guys have probably seen all those terms and may have used some of those in some of your jobs. Those are all the typical things that people use or talk about or reference when they talk about red team testing and physical-based attacks. But today we're just talking about RFID. We'll get to this.
Yeah, so what we're focused on, we don't care about hacking a ski lift. We don't care about an RFID loyalty tag. We're focused on two things, or two frequencies. Low frequency and high frequency RFID tags. So these are your two main frequencies that HID uses. The low frequency is the Crocs stuff, so all the older cards, and the higher frequency is your I-class type cards. So the read distance is a little different on those because it's based on the frequency. So when we mention the Prox card, that's the old legacy stuff, right? The low frequency, 125. That's used by 80% of the organizations in the U.S. 80%. No encryption, unencrypted Prox cards. Yeah. Cheers, Mike.
I'm not chugging it. Mm-mm. Oh, it's awful.
So who is vulnerable to
Dave is vulnerable.
attacks? Government facilities. You know, most of all the old buildings, they haven't gone in and retrofitted and put I-class in. It's still the old Prox stuff. Medical facilities, banks, nuclear facilities, power, water, education. I mean, it goes on and on and on.
Schools.
Anybody that uses badges is pretty much vulnerable. So this is at a high level how a badge system works. So there's several components involved in this. So this shows the card, the reader, then you have the controller, and then you have the host server or application that manages and gives feedback from the controller.
So essentially you've got reader. We got a fully functional badge system here that we got from a company called Midpoint Security. They'll assemble any kind of badge system you need. The edge readers power over Ethernet, so whatever software you guys run on the back end as far as your badge system, whether it's WinDSX, Linnell, Paycom, whatever it might be, you can just plug these things into a badge system if you want to have things at home to test with in your lab. So here, what Josh was saying, we have a reader, we have a controller, and then on the back end they communicate over some of the stuff Josh will talk about later.
Yeah, so how this works is the reader of the card's passive and it's powered by the reader, so the reader puts out the field, that's the power. You get within the range with the card, it gets powered, it sends the data it's got back on the chip, out the integrated circuit, out the antenna. That gets read by the reader. The reader then takes that, converts it over to WEGAN, which is ones and zeros, binary back to the controller. The controller then takes that, turns it back around, puts it in the hex, and passes it to the back-end system. So several technologies here. Several that HID uses. Again, proximity cards, which is the old proc stuff, low frequency. Then you have the I-class, and then you have the multi-technology cards. So multi-technology cards, in a lot of institutions, you'll see them making a transition over from procs to I-class. So during that time, what they're doing is they're putting in these multi-readers. So they read both low and high frequency. So they can work through, and people can still badge in as they make that transition.
Pretty quick on this. It just talks about different distances based on those types of cards. General rule of thumb, most of these badges will work anywhere from ½ an inch to 1 inch with typical readers like this, and then we'll show you some of the long-range stuff here in a minute.
So this is what we look at when we get on to the Arduino side of things. So this is the actual WEGAN that's sent from the reader to the controller. This is all clear. This is all unencrypted. There's two wires that you really have to worry about. That's the green and the white wire, data 0, data 1. Those carry the WEGAN pulses. Again, all you have to do, if you can't make a badge and get into the system, you can't impersonate. All you got to do is get that wires, that's running in between the controller. You simply put on an Arduino, tap into those two wires. It's battery powered. You pull those signals off, and you have all the badge out of that.
So shown in the bottom here is just a 26-bit format for HID cards. And the things we want to stress here that we'll talk about more as the talk goes on are there's two pieces of data that are on a card that's essential to getting into any kind of facility. That's the facility code that's assigned to that particular location or several locations for that company, and then the access card number that's assigned per user. So those two things are essentially what the badge system reads when you badge in, and whether they're unencrypted or encrypted, it's still the same concept when you're badging into a system.
And one more, Eric. If you look up there, top left, the WEGAN, that's on the Arduino, we look for the falling edge of that, and that's how we pick up the ones and zeros.
So, like I said before, facility code, access card number, since those two things are used to get into a building or a facility, those should be considered somewhat sensitive, right? If you know a facility code or an access card number or both of those, then you pretty much got a ticket directly into the building. What we found doing some of our research is that piece of information or those two pieces of information aren't always private. You can go to places like eBay, and when companies buy cards from their vendor, they go and buy a batch of cards, usually 50 at a time, 100 at a time, whatever it might be. And they buy these access cards in a series. Unfortunately, they like to print not only the series numbers on the side of the box, but also the facility code, which is usually much harder to get than someone's access card number because it's not printed on the card. So if you're lucky enough to find someone that's selling these boxes of cards online, do a little OSINT, typically you can pretty much figure out where they work. And now you've got not only facility code, but you probably have card numbers that maybe they didn't use in that range, and you can make a card and get into their building. So people don't consider these things sensitive. We don't understand why, but they're all over the internet. If you weren't lucky enough to actually buy a box, there's also companies out there that you can give the serial number and order number that's printed on your card to this particular vendor. There's several of them out there. Pay them $15, $20. They have access to an HID database, customer database. They pull up that previous order, and they'll actually tell you what that card had on it, whether it was facility code 10, access card number 1002, whatever it might be. So use the services that are out there for your benefit.
Yeah, so we're trying to stress you've got to protect that data. Your facility code and your user ID range are very sensitive.
So let's get into the more technical stuff, the fun stuff for us. We'll actually talk about attacking those two types of cards, whether it's unencrypted Prox2 or the encrypted high-frequency I-class. So everybody heard of a Proxmark? Anybody heard of a Proxmark? Ever used one? I'll pull it out, but the cable's kind of short. So Proxmark can handle, based on the antenna you have hooked up to it, low frequency and high frequency. It can also do other types of cards, MyFairs, things like that. What we're going to be using it for here today is demonstrating not only how to read a tag off a card and decode some of that information, but also how to replay that and also how to modify and do some of those things you can do. A couple $100, you can get the antenna, the Proxmark, software you need. You can also run it on a variety of platforms too. So first demo we wanted to do is show you just straight off of, God, that thing's loud. Just with a portable battery. Proxmark has a nice built-in wizard mode that failed on me at DEF CON.
It's kind of like Gallagher, you guys in the front might want to protect yourself.
and you stick in, this is where we smash the watermelon. So, portable, battery powered. We got it in read mode right now. And if you're lucky enough to walk by and grab Josh's butt, you can get his badge. It then stores that into its first memory bank. And just to show you that card works on the badge system. So we've got access with that card. But now if we've been lucky enough to grab Josh's butt, we've read his card in his pocket or hanging on his waist, and then we can put that in replay and present that to the badge system.
It works.
Yeah, that's the one I threw in DerbyCon. So straight out of the box, wizard mode, portable, battery powered, works great. What also works great is carrying that thing around on site. Someone's going to typically, hey, what's going on? It's suspicious. Somebody's carrying this thing around. If you've taken Chris and Ian's red team class, or you've seen some of the things we've talked about in the past, if you've got a clipboard on site, walking around, no one ever questions you. And antennas transmit nicely through these plastic clipboards. So you can conceal all these things right inside of a clipboard, battery power, a good 10, 15 minutes of walking around, asking Josh for a light, doing whatever you got to do to get close enough to get a badge read, put it in replay mode, badge in. So pretty simple out of the box. Proxmark works great. So that was a quick little demo that everyone's seen 1,000 times.
So now what?
So now we have badges, or Josh's badge, and Josh is a poor employee at the company, doesn't have access to anything, he's just a paper pusher. And they decided that they wanted to give someone else access to a data center. So the guys at Foundstone figured out a way to take a known good read of a facility code and an access card number, and then brute, because essentially those are usually in a series within your badge system when you enroll them. And you can present with a custom firmware on the Proxmark. You can present the Proxmark to the reader. It'll roll through those access codes until it finds one that opens the door. So maybe you've used Josh's access to get into the building, but he doesn't have data center access. So now you're inside, you have a known good read in your first memory bank, you roll up to the data center door, you stick it in brute mode, it rolls through a series of sequences on the access card numbers till it finds one that opens the door. So works pretty good. It does have a couple flaws built in that you gotta tweak a bit on the timing. If you present too many card numbers to the reader at one time, the reader may not respond in time, you might miss a valid login. So keep those things in mind when you're doing proxbrute. However, what we've decided to do is take an actual tag. So when the Proxmark reads a card, or the card is presented to a reader, it presents a tag ID. The tag ID is a hex value that contains customer information, some parity bits, and also the two pieces of data, access card number and facility code. So 26-bit cards are a public format. You can go out and see how they're structured. 35-bit, which is what we're showing here, aren't public, but through some decoding and through some reversing, we figured out where in the binary string the facility code is located and the access card number is located. So if you look at the first card, which is 44351, which is the one that I badged in with a few minutes ago, down here, and 44351 has some bits in the beginning in the binary. So you take the hex string that's presented, which is your tag ID. I'll show you this in a second. The tag ID, convert that manually if you'd like to into your long binary format. And then based on where the location is in that binary string, you know the first bit is your parity bit. You know the next 20, I believe, are your access card number, and the next 12 are your facility code. So you know in that binary sequence where facility code and where access card number are. Simply reverse those down to decimal or integer if you're using Ruby, and now you know that it's facility code 44 and card number 44351. Well, maybe through your pen testing, your red team testing, whatever it might be, instead of going up to a data center door and standing there for 5 minutes till you open it, you may want to show up with a card that already works. So through intelligence gathering, through taking a picture of someone's badge, through some kind of intelligence capability to gain another badge number that you know works, you can take that new badge number, convert that from integer back to binary, and then reassemble that piece of binary in place of the other badge number, and now you have your long binary string with the new badge number in it. Convert that back to hex, then you can put the Proxmark into simulate mode and have the Proxmark simulate that new tag ID with a different badge number. Make sense? So I'll do a quick little demo and show you guys that. So essentially you're doing privilege escalation, right? You went from standard user, known facility code, known badge number that works, and now you want to change the badge number. So hook up the Proxmark this time to the laptop. I'll throw it.
Yeah, because the thing about the proxbrute is it's just real noisy, right? If you're having to stand in front of a door and there's a camera there and you're in front of it for 10, 15 minutes proving something. I mean, it's just a real loud attack. Yes, it does work, but it would be an attack of last resort.
So the command's real simple. Any of your, I don't know if you can read that at the bottom, but you're running a low-frequency command with the Proxmark. Use an HID format card, and then sim is the command, and you just give it the tag of what you want to present. So in that slide, we calculated the same stuff I show you here. So this is what I had in the slide up top. And we've now taken that long binary string with our new card number in it. We joined it back together. We then used a conversion from binary to hex, and now we have this new tag ID in hex format. So we want to use the information we gained from 44351 card, which was facility code 44, and the leading portion and the trailing portion are just parity and preamble. You reuse that piece of information on the front and the back end. You reuse your facility code because it's going to be the same for all your users in the company, and you change the actual badge number to something that you learned through some other means, badge access or system access to the badge system. Maybe you found a badge report that had a badge number on it, or maybe you saw it on someone's badge because they're nice enough to print them. So you know a badge number that works, you want to make that badge. So you go through the sequence of creating your binary string for that particular user code, or that access card number, and now you come back with your new tag ID that's in hex. Present that to the Proxmark, puts into simulate mode, and then I'm probably going to lose the projector cable here, but if you want to carry it. So now we're simulating 440. Go ahead and pull it up. Just bring the whole laptop. So now we're presenting that new badge to the system, opens up with a created badge that you made. 2 demos worked.
On the roll.
Yeah, killing it. So pretty simple, right? You do a little bit of binary, a little bit of conversion, make it a hex, create your tag with your new badge number, present that with a Proxmark. If you want to go one step further, the Proxmark supports writing to an actual blank card. You buy a T5557 card, and you can write that information to a card. So whether you want to show up with this in your clipboard or show up with a card, create it off-site, show up day one, badge in, you're inside the building. Or now you're in data center. Pretty cool, right? Cool. Clapping for us. So we've shown how to do cloning and replay, and then we also showed how to take information you've learned about a new badge number, create your own tag, present that to the reader, so you're not actually standing there doing brute for 5 minutes and getting caught, and not creating a lot of noise in the logs on the badge system, because every time you fail a login, just like any system, it's going to store that in some kind of log file. It's debatable on whether they monitor those things, but that's like with any system, right?
They don't. So the problem is off-the-shelf Proxmark won't get you very far. You know, as we just demonstrated, you got about a read range about an inch, maybe an inch and a half. So you got to be a creepy smoker guy or just grinding up on somebody pretty much to get their card. So through red team testing, that's one of the first things we did. We had a job, and we knew, we identified, okay, we know the card technology, we looked at the readers, we knew the traffic patterns, we saw that people didn't have protectors, just had their badges hanging out. So we're like, oh shit, so now how do we get, without getting up on somebody, how are we going to get that badge? So what we did is we started with off-the-shelf stuff. So,
Can't hear? Josh.
yeah. So what we did is we bought a off-the-shelf long-range reader. This is what typically people use for parking decks.
So a lot of times when you notice you walk into a building, you have to badge in pretty close to the reader, right? You're within a couple inches, you almost have to tap it. In garages, they don't want people getting out of their cars every time they drive into a parking garage, so those have a much longer range of read. They provide power to the card over 1 to 2 feet, usually out of the box. However, they're hardwired with power. So Josh figured out a way through some Arduino code and wiring into an actual parking garage reader, and then we provide portable power with an 8 AA battery pack. It typically lasts 15, 20 minutes. That gives us enough power and capabilities with Arduino to do longer range read. You want some prox cards? So what you're looking at here is Josh's code he wrote with the Arduino. Work, baby.
First thing you gotta do is you gotta power the bitch on.
There you go.
It's in non-covert mode right now.
So there's one wire that powers the speaker. Put a jumper on it, unplug it when you want to use it in the field. So now Josh is within 1.5 feet of that reader. Much easier for me to have that in a bag, carrying it around, whatever, and walk up and bum a light from Josh. I'm not having to touch his butt.
Yeah. Yeah, so again, all off-the-shelf stuff. That's the Arduino Uno. 2 wires are the Data 1, Data 0 wires that are Wiegand. They go in, the way we got it set up here in the code is we've got 2 digital inputs. So it basically, right here, we put pins 2 and 3 in input mode, and it looks for the fallen edge of the signal. So we then take that, put that into a bit stream, and based on the length of the string, we know exactly what card it is. So as Eric showed earlier, this is for 35-bit. So we get a 35-bit binary string. We now know this is preamble. This is the part of the user code. This is another space in the middle, facility code. So then we take those things, pull it out, and this one just outputs. This is just like a little lab version. So this one just outputs the serial monitor. This version here, we put a SD card on it. So it writes the SD card. So if you had it in a backpack, briefcase, whatever, you're walking around, it writes that. If your battery goes dead, in this scenario, you lose most everything unless you got the serial monitor up and open.
And then once we have a read, we then take it back to the shop, the scary van in the parking lot, whatever it might be, recreate that card like we did before, and now we've gone from a 3-foot read in a smoking area to creating the actual card in the van and walking back in. Cool. So now it gets a little more tricky. This is the lame, been around for a while. Everyone's talked about Proxmark vulnerability, or ProxCard2 vulnerabilities. Not a lot of sophistication there because it's unencrypted. However, it's 80% of the companies out there, so keep that in mind. You'll run into the hard stuff every once in a while, but 80% of the time it's unencrypted. So pretty trivial to break into a building, right?
True story.
So let's step it up a bit. Let's talk about the encryption. The high frequency, the 13.56 megahertz, has encryption. HID decided to get wise on what was going on with the old Prox2 cards and started encrypting the actual transmission of that data. So Josh decided to go back to the lab and pretty much took the same concept that we did with the Prox2.
Yeah. So the beauty of this is, again, let's go back and think about Wiegand. Wiegand is the same no matter what. So the badge reader itself can do all its encryption, all its fancy stuff that it wants to do. On the back side of that, clear text on those 2 wires back to our controller, or it's Wiegand. Again, data 1, data 0 is what we want. So this one is kind of the same thing. So what we did here, this is using another version, and what this one is, this one's actually got an LCD hooked up to it, so it can be standalone. You don't have to have it hooked up to anything else. So again, same thing. This is a R90 HID long-range reader. Again, for parking decks.
So different reader, reads high frequency, reads I-class, reads encryption. Pretty much the same read distance, 2 to 3 feet. There are some tricks out there to get longer distance out of them.
Yeah. So again, it's in non-covert mode right now. So
So we know that, and we'll show this in a minute when we read the actual card, but this is a 34835, and he also decoded it to facility code, was it 898?
Yep, and if you can see here on this, I don't move
They can't see that.
But there's an LCD here that shows the printout, and it tells you the bits of the card, what kind of card it is, and it puts out the facility code and user information.
What's that error? Huh. So one thing to note, and we have a link here at the end, Josh has put up all the code on our GitHub site, so if you guys want to go out and build one of these, the bulk of your cost is actually getting the reader off of eBay. They're a couple $100. The rest of it is 20, 30
Yeah, trivial.
bucks.
You know, again, you can do it on a teensy. We used the Uno. They had some laying around. So any of those, you just need 2 digital inputs. So a lot of form factors you can play around with.
So a quick little summary, you want to talk about it?
Yeah, so again, the problem with what we had here is you can see all these wires, right? So there's a bunch of wires put in. The thing is that moves around, you know, in your case, and if you get one wire off, it won't work right. So we basically have took fritzing, drew this up. It's just a standard LCD board, goes into a little contrast pot, and then we put some options on there for different types of power sources. So that way you don't have your wires all loose like that. It just sticks in there. We've actually made screw-down terminals and a couple different options for that as well. So this was the first part to draw it up. The next things we did is we uploaded that to Fritzing. They went and made the board. So that's what the board looks like on the left. which is a derivative of what we did there in the lab.
So there you can see Josh's awesome LCD that worked. So if you want to do card identification, works great just sitting there. If you steal somebody's card, you get a visitor badge, whatever it might be, you can do a card ID, get the facility code, get the card type, get the access card number, take that back to your shop, use it when you need to use it.
I like those boxes there.
Thanks for coming in late, Ian. Try to sneak in, I see it. Hey, you're on a roll this week. So Josh gave the demo already. Same concept we did with low frequency. A little bit of code on the Arduino, a different kind of reader. Long range read again, 3 feet away. Now I've got your encrypted iClass information I need.
So what do you do with it, Eric, once I got it?
Let me show you. So what we're playing off of is something that some really smart guys figured out several years ago, and HID never really got smart about it. Through some research with the iClass technology and the types of readers that they use. The Revision A readers that came out were vulnerable in a sense that they left the serial interface enabled. So through some different types of wiring and things they figured out, they were able to actually use the serial interface to dump the firmware off of those Revision A readers. What's inside the firmware? The master encryption keys HID uses for encryption and decryption of the iClass secure cards. Wah, wah. So this was 2010 when this came out, and we'll show you today that it works with even the highest bit length cards that still use iClass because HID never changed the master key. For them to change the master key, they would have to essentially either flash everyone's readers that are on the side of their facilities, which is pretty difficult, or replace all of that, which would probably put them out of business. So in turn, their alternative to mitigating that risk was continue to sell these iClass cards but a higher bit length because they would be harder to figure out. Not true. Or they would sell additional technology to put on top of those things that could somewhat give you a little more security, whether it's two-factor, PIN authentication, bio, things like that. Also flaws in those we'll talk about in a minute. So 2010's been out there, still a problem today. So now you've got 80% unencrypted, and the other 20% that use iClass, or 19%, whatever they are also vulnerable. So 99% of the companies out there are vulnerable to what we have on the table here. So from that research, touch this one?
Yeah, so top left, you can see that's the ICFP interface. That's how you go into the Rev A readers and dump the firmware out. So that's where, if you wanted to go down this path yourself, that's the first place you would start, is dumping the firmware, then searching it and looking for the key. But, you know, that takes research, and you got to actually work, you know.
You got to burn up a few readers in your basement.
Yeah. So what if you could just get on a website in China and buy one? So there's a couple ways you can do that. One way is you go out and you buy a OmniKey 5321, which is right off the shelf. Buy it off of eBay. I think it was $100 or something. Stock firmware. Don't need to flash it. Don't need anything special. What you do need is buying the fancy little thumb drive that comes from China that is on a separate laptop that never gets connected to the network ever again. Ever again, which is why I have multiple laptops. So that becomes essentially the China laptop. And this China laptop has this piece of software that you see down in the bottom corner, and it's essentially they've provided a way to read the card, read the memory blocks, and then write the card using this OmniKey 5321 with their custom driver, their interfaces with it, and they also have the built-in stolen master encryption keys within this interface. So, go China. So we'll demo that for you for a second. All right, what are we up to, demo 5? All right. All right, come on, China, don't fail me now. So when we take this particular card that Josh read earlier, which was 34835, facility code 898, that badges into our building right now, right? Oh, come on now. Bam! Throw it.
Bam!
Yeah, so with this setup, or with any off-the-shelf iClass little reader, you can get the facility code and the user ID. So like Eric my shit, then you're going to have to elevate it, right?
Yep. So first thing we'll do is show how to physically clone a card of I-class, which is encrypted, yada, 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 right? So using standard China software, we'll first read this card. Card's present. We read the actual whole card. So now we've read the memory blocks off this particular card. And all you really care about is memory block 0 through 9. So we break down what the blocks are over here. Block 0 is your serial number for your card. There's not a lot of badge systems out there that we've seen that actually use the serial number for the card. Most people and companies and vendors too believe that the serial number is written to the card and you can't change it. However, it's a memory block. So memory blocks can be overwritten, right? So memory block 0 is card serial number. Memory block 1 and 2 specify some information about the customer and the card type. Block 6, also some information about the card, not really essential, but when you're doing a clone, 1, 2, and 6 are necessary to write the initial format of the card. Block 7 is where it actually gets juicy. Like we said before, facility code and card number, right? That's where that entity data is stored. Block 8 and 9 are where your two-factor and multi-factor data would be written. So we can talk about it here real quick if you want to. Block 8 and 9, if you had a two-factor system on your building, whether it was PIN or BIO or Retina or whatever it might be, that particular piece of data gets written to memory block 8 and 9 in a digital signature. So if Josh's fingerprint was written to his card and it was written in block 8, and I decided to clone his card, but I have a digital signature of my fingerprint, I just put my fingerprint in block 8 instead of Josh's. The problem we've seen with some of these badge systems, and we're letting the cat out of the bag a little bit here, but it's fine, is when the badge system authenticates you and validates that data, a lot of times they're doing client-side validation. Everyone knows what's bad about that, right? They're reading what's on your card and your finger has to match that, or your eye has to match that. So if I overwrite Josh's data with my data, I walk up with his access card and facility code number, I badge in, and then I fingerprint in, my fingerprint matches my card that I told it was on. So now I've presented my entity information and it's client-side verified, not server-side verified.
And not all systems are set up like that, but the majority of them are. So all you have to do is get one of the, it's the HID reader with the bio at the bottom. So you get it, you enroll yourself, it writes a card. So then you take it and copy those to the block 8 and 9, and that has the new thumbprint template on it.
So we've read this 34835 facility code 898. We know that gets into the building. That's the one I'm going to write to. We know this one gets into the building. We know it gets into the building. Yep. We've read that card. We have all the memory blocks, and then we take a card that does not work yet.
Yeah. Don't work.
Nothing up my sleeves. And we're essentially going to write each one of those memory blocks to a new card. So we have the blank card on there. China makes it nice for us, and we just take the blocks that we want. So remember, block 0 is your CSN. We take block 1. We write block 1. We write block 2. We write block 6. All right.
Noob.
We write block.
You was hack, bro.
Shut up. We write block 1. We write block 2. We write block 6.
Yes.
Yes. We're at block 6, 7, and because 8 and 9 are empty right now because we don't have bio or any other two-factor PIN information, things like that, we can just write the same one to 8 and 9.
And the cool thing about this little reader is that if you look in the card area, the little box under it, it auto reads the card and tells when a card's in its presence. So that'll populate whenever you put a card to it.
So drum roll, did that work? Bam.
But wait, there's more.
You like nuts? Try the slap chop. So, what if we want to do privilege escalation again? Josh has access to badge system. He knows a actual badge number. He wants to modify that data. It's a little bit different with I-class. iClass, because of the encryption, uses an algorithm that was released in this Heart of Darkness paper that all this started from when that vulnerability came out with the master key being stolen. So essentially, you've acquired the data that you need. Access card number is what we all need, right? That is stored in block 7. We run that access card number through the algorithm with the stolen master key that we're not going to drop here, obviously. And once we've done that, we then write that particular piece of data to block 7. So block 7 changes between cards, and all the other blocks are the same. We overwrite block 7 with a new card we want to try, and now we badge in with that. So essentially, you're doing brooding, but you're doing a one-time brute. As of today, there's no tool that exists that does prox brooding like they do with the prox 2 cards because of the overhead you need to generate that block 7 every time. So one of the things that we've been looking into that we might try and pursue if we have time is figure out a way to generate that block 7 offline ahead of time, and then take a device to the reader, and it goes through a series of block 7 attempts as it makes that block, and it generates the card tag, writes the card, and presents it to the reader. Yep, absolutely. So same concept here. Now we've got, we know that this card before, this is a different card, this card before was 38435, 34835, whatever, it badged in. But through OSINT, through badge system access, through taking a picture of someone's badge, through Josh getting drunk at a bar and leaving his badge laying out, whatever it might be, Josh's new badge that has privileged access in the environment is a different badge number of 1337. That has access with a different badge. So if you're lucky enough to get that particular piece of information, I should have shown the slide first. Too many laptops. Come on. Same concept, right? CSN block 0, not necessary. Block 1, block 2 stays the same between those cards, so you don't need to worry about it. Block 6 stays the same. Block 7 is where it changes. Block 8 and 9 are empty. Simple concept. Calculate your new block 7 through the crazy math, beautiful mind stuff the Heart of Darkness has, and we then generate a new block 7, and we overwrite block 7 for our new card.
You got to carry the 1 too.
Carry the 1s, divide by 0. So we've calculated our block 7. We've gone through the crazy algorithm. We haven't built a generator for this yet to automate it, but we've got our new block 7, which is different than this block 7 here. E5 is our original. Our new block 7 is this. We take a read on this card, which is the one that works. So here's our dump of our card that we want to try and clone. And this matches the block 7 that we've calculated with our algorithm and a stolen key, so the 1D75A, right? So you create your card offline with you can also use these tags. These are nice little key fobs, still in iClass. Does not work right now. Still writes the same way. Most of these cards write for about 100,000 times. So buy you a box of cards, you got plenty of writes on it. We'll take each one of those blocks again, same concept we did before. We'll write block 1 to the new card. We'll write block 2. Go to block 6. We'll take our new block 7 for the 1337 card. And then the blank 8 and 9 that we don't care about, but you have to have it. And now we've created a card offline with a new badge number based on our block 7 we generated, and that one now badges in. Every demo worked. So we've gone from cloning a standard card to privilege escalation again, but now with iClass, secure, encrypted, master key stolen, all that fun stuff. So there's a couple other attacks that are vulnerable to these types of systems. Josh talked about it a little bit before. You want to talk about it now?
Yeah, so this one's really easy to do. So again, you take any off-the-shelf Arduino, Teensy, whatever you want to do. There's two wires that all we need is the data 1, data 0, which are the green and white wires on any Wiegand stream. So every controller every reader that goes back to the controller's got the little round, bundle of wires going back. You splice into that. All you have to do is power this. You can do it like this with the SD on it. Put this in a wall, put this in a closet, put it anywhere, put it behind the reader, and tap into those two wires. And every read that it gets, it'll write the badge information and timestamp if you have an extra module on it to the SD card.
So essentially all you're doing is tapping into to wire 0, wire 1, data 0, data 1, and siphoning all that data to an SD card. Come back a day later. We were talking about this yesterday. Come back a day later, embed it in another reader, put a fake reader next to it.
Yep.
If you can get into the wall or get into the switch closet where the controller is stored, anywhere you can get to that wiring panel, tap into those two wires with an alligator clip. Now you're reading that data unencrypted right to SD. Take that back off the line, build it in your van, build it back in the lab, show up the next day with a badge that works.
Free candy.
Free candy for everybody. So those are direct attacks on badges and badge systems. But back to the red team piece, a lot of stuff that Chris and Ian talked about in their class is blended types of attacks. So some of the things that we like to go after for particular cases like we just showed you is if we can gain access to the badge system, badge systems are typically bad in general because they're usually on the same network as corporate, which usually means domain admin gets you there or local server admin gets you there. Badge system access gives you a lot of different capabilities that we could talk about for hours at the bar if you guys want to. But one of the things we like to do is guard tours and fire drills. Open up all doors, open up one door, disable a reader, turn off bio, whatever you need. So a lot of times when we're doing attacks against facilities and corporations is we'll usually have someone remotely that's doing things from the outside. Chappie on the outside, a little Iron Eagle. And he's coming in from the outside, he's got badge system access, someone else is on the ground, we've got boots on the ground that can actually go into the facility, remotely open the door, got access to the badge system, now someone's inside the data center. So blended type of attacks play very well, particularly in the physical space, but when we're talking about badge systems in general, because if you can gain access to the badge system, getting pieces of data like facility code, access card number, then go offline, make those cards, come back in. So badge systems in general are usually great honeypots for that type of information, but also they're pretty trivial to get to because vendors usually come in and set them up. We all know the problems with that. Usually they have defaults on them. So a lot of times badge systems are very easy to get to, and once you're on them, you've got physical access, electronic access, whatever you need for that particular company. Also, one of the things we like to do with badge systems is modify rights. If Josh is lucky enough to come in as the bug man and get a visitor badge for the day and walk away, he's then able to go back to the car, modify the access rights of that badge that only has general access to the lobby and first floor, and buff that badge by adding more rights to it because you have badge system access. So that badge system is enrolled, it's a very limited user, but now you've elevated privileges by adding rights to executive floor, to data center, whatever it might be, because you pop the badge system.
And also turn off logging as well, and alerting is another thing we like to do. So that way, whoever's watching it doesn't see pop-ups and see someone badging in and things like that. So a lot you can hide there.
And one thing to keep in mind too when you're doing physical attacks, you guys have probably ran into this a lot in other areas too, but badge systems and facilities are typically bad because they're usually not corporate employees. They're outsourced, whoever company it is for that particular region. They typically aren't savvy enough to watch for some of those things, like why was there 5 failed attempts at one time on this door at 8 o'clock at night? They're not watching for failed attempts. Not like a domain admin that's watching logs for Active Directory and sees why was there a brute force against my SQL server with 40 failed logins. They usually pick that stuff up pretty quick. But badge systems don't typically have those types of monitoring and correlation systems built into them. And people typically fail there because they don't see multiple failed logins or modification of rights or a badge system gets reassigned and reprovisioned to a different user. Those are all things that we try and test to show impact immediately and also show gaps in processes on the facility side because they're not trained. These guys aren't technical guys. They're paid to carry a gun and walk the facility and look for people trying to break in physically. They don't particularly look at electronic flaws and electronic indicators.
And that's also the box you want to own, right? If you can walk in as a receptionist, or if there's a guard as the receptionist in the front, that's looking at that guard console all day, that's a pretty, good attack service. You can go after that box.
So some of the things we're working on now, just to kind of give you guys a primer on what we're going to be talking about in the future. The bio and pin stuff we talked about, block 8 and block 9, it's stored there. We're going to start attacking that more and figure out what we can do for client-side verification, what we can present to a reader. It's rare we run into these. Usually they're only on secured pieces of a facility like data center, telco closets, things like that. So for general access, usually we don't see these on the outside because they're more expensive. But if you're trying to get access to a higher privileged area, typically you'll run into two-factor.
And what this does is it verifies the two pieces of information, right? It verifies the card and the second level of authentication that you provide to it. And once its logic inside there, once it authenticates that, then it sends that Wiegand signal back to the back end. And that Wiegand signal is the same signal or same information that gets sent over your regular card read. So the reverse thing would be, instead of putting this little Arduino on the wire and capturing, you could also send out and just send that data right over, bypassing that reader.
So the other cool thing we're working on right now that we're pretty stoked about, we almost had it ready for this, but it'll probably be ready tomorrow, which is funny. Building a mesh network where we have the capabilities to put someone on the ground with simulation, cloning, reading, things like that, but then having access to that particular system and what they're carrying in their bag remotely. So we're working on building a mesh network with 4G into the system that's on the ground. We then have command and control remotely, so if someone's in another state and needs some help from the red team phones in, dials in, whatever it might be, whether it's Zigbee, Wi-Fi, 4G, any of those control capabilities, and we're working on building a mesh for that. Want to talk about some of the other stuff?
Yeah, or I go break into your house and I steal your card while you're gone.
Dirty.
And send that data over to Eric because he's in front of the door at your building. The next big thing that we're going to release is we've just weaponized PowerShell. So for pen testers who get an interpreter session, the problem previously with PowerShell was you couldn't run it through shell properly. A lot of times it will break or you're not formatting it right.
PowerShell through interpreter typically is bad. Doesn't work well with interaction.
So what we've done is we've just weaponized it, meaning that we've just rewrote it and put it, we put it into interpreter. So as soon as you get an interpreter shell back, all the PowerShell options are there, power up, power view, all those. So we just call those and it does the .NET IEX call, downloads it, executes it in memory, and it waits. Instead of writing the file, we're looking at the console, waiting until that command is done, and then pipes that information back to us. We also have the ability to encode that and put it on the box if the box can't get to the internet or something like that. So what we're doing with that is now that we've weaponized it, we're now taking those commands and making it go out and look in info fields in Active Directory for information on a badge reader. We're looking at ports. We can now port scan with PowerShell in Meterpreter. So it can go out and look for those known ports with those badge systems as well. So that's one of the first things we want to look for is finding that badge system and going after it.
And then one other thing we've talked about, and we were talking about this yesterday actually, was if you're walking into your building and you badge in, if there's another badge next to it, another badge system, another reader, what's the chances you're going to think that's suspicious? Maybe they're replacing something. Maybe they're migrating to a new system. Someone badging in isn't going to look and say, why are there two badge readers on the side of this building instead of one? Or unwiring one of them and replacing it with your backdoor one. Or a keypad. So we're working on it right now, is actually backdooring some of these readers to have the Arduino capabilities with the mesh network on the back end so that we can physically drop off some kind of badge reader on the side of the building, let it set for a day, collect the information we need, or feed it back to us remotely, and then we show up a day later or a week later or a month later because that stuff never changes, and badge in with the data we collected from the backdoor reader.
And with the Zigbee mesh, if we got 3 operators on the ground inside of one area, the Zigbee talks to each other so everybody has that information real time. So one person's out in the parking lot or wherever and smoking air and he gets that first badge, it's then propagated to all the other operators in the building.
So we'll roll through this last part pretty quick. You guys know most of this stuff from RFID talks in the past, but simple mitigation here is the common things around RFID, right? You know, the shielded readers, which are known to be flawed in some designs. Physically leaving your badge exposed when you're at the bar drinking, not thinking someone's looking at it. Someone being able to take a picture of it, physically identify what kind of badge it is, what kind of system you have, whether it's unencrypted or encrypted iClass. The information on the side of it, I could then go look up from that website we found on the internet that looks up your facility code and card numbers for you. So there's a lot of data that leaks out just by physically having your badge exposed to people. Also, being able to read someone's badge obviously is bad. So the general practice and the steps around mitigation of RFID leakage obviously applies here. But also the big one that we want to stress is the gaps we were talking about before around badge systems in general. Air gap these things off your network, have them behind a firewall in a DMZ somewhere. Don't have them flat on your network with all the other corporate systems that are typically vulnerable and exposed, and someone can jump to a badge system and siphon data out they need to go build badges. So segment these guys properly, because badge systems are physical access to your building. So if they're on your flat network, if they're exposed, if they have the same local admin as your servers, if they have defaults, if they have vulnerabilities, because typically old legacy badge systems can't be upgraded to the brand new Windows 7, they have to run on XP or something. So whatever it might be, keep those things in mind when you're designing your network with badge systems connected to them. And then obviously the gaps we talked about around monitoring and correlation. Badge systems in general don't have those things enabled by default, so there's always flaws in someone catching an active attack against your facility. I'd say probably 90% of the time we do red team attacks against facilities. The things we do that are typically noisy against a building aren't detected properly. They're pretty good at watching cameras, but watching badge systems and logs and correlating what's read to them, they don't ever see, because they're so used to that loading dock door being open 5 times a day and alarming that they don't catch it when someone shims the door or walks in or bypasses it or badges in with a stolen badge, or Josh badged in the US today, but then he went to China and badged into the other facility. That doesn't make sense. Josh shouldn't be in 2 locations at the same time. Those things they don't always catch because the correlation isn't inherently built into the system. So those are the gaps that we see right now just in the industry in general, and where those things need to take off. Some vendors have gotten better about it, but there are still gaps in the way they're designed and implemented today. Yep. That's it. So, questions? We got a few minutes, right, for questions? Are we good? No?
There's the code at the bottom if you want to get the